private land, which was mapped out in an extremely controversial accompanying map. That's one of the stupid things they did. A proposal to retroactively make invisible all houses from houses and canoeable waterways, which I call the cultural eradication. And then what I call the Indian reservation idea, to make all the state agencies to be headquartered in Railroad, the welfare agency, the state police, of course the Adirondack Park Agency, and so on, with the blue line as their jurisdictional territory. There was an accompanying $2 billion Environmental Quality Bond Act, which New York State Comptroller Ed Reagan told me was intended to buy up land in the Adirondacks. This was a period of great victory by the Adirondack people over the enemy who would like to eradicate our population from the Adirondacks. At that time, I still believed that our enemy was the radical environmentalists. Well, they are. They have assumed great power, and indeed, they are the enemy, but the impetus still comes from the wealth of New York City. Because of the phenomenal outpouring of organized opposition by people living in the Adirondacks, the legislature never acted on the bill or any of its later versions. It was originally written by Bob Glennon, the executive director of the APA. In this room today are many of the leaders who are responsible for this great victory. Dennis Phillips, Fred Monroe, Claude LaCour, Susan Allen, Howard Orban, Gary Barber, and my husband Pete. We were young then, but we're not slowing down yet. The electorate rejected by 0.7% the Environmental Bond Act. I still remember 7 a.m. the next morning, hearing the radio, and I couldn't believe my ears. Votes in the North Country ran as high as 16-1 against the Bond Act, which brought a successful, we brought a successful pro se lawsuit that Pete and I wrote, and we brought in Bob Schultz and Gertz to challenge the governor's illegal promotion of the Bond Act. And the Farm Bureau and us four were blamed by Peter Burley's legal firm's law journal for the Bond Act's defeat because of the negative publicity we created. Who is Peter Burley? Well, it was Peter Burley. He was the assemblyman who was the point man against Glenn Harris for the passage of the Adirondack Park Agency Act, the president of the National Audubon Society, and the executive director of the 21st Century Commission that was basically defeated in the electoral vote and in the lobbying. Now, international opportunities for industrial production, combined with global economic pressure on domestic production of paper and wood products, had combined forces with the incredible disposable wealth of environmental organizations like the Nature Conservancy and the Mellons Conservation Fund to have a disastrous impact on private land ownership in the Adirondacks. The Conservation Fund acted in 1998 as a surrogate for the state to purchase and flip the 139,000-acre Champion International holdings in mainly Franklin and St. Lawrence counties to the state, as 29,000 acres of fee simple and 110,000 acres of conservation easements. The Nature Conservancy flipped the largest private holding in the Adirondacks, nearly all the lands of the International Paper Company, 250,000 acres, almost entirely in conservation easements, to the state in 2004. It intends to transfer 65,000 acres, about 100 square miles, to the state for forever wild, never to be logged again. They always say that they're going to give, protect most of the lands with conservation easements and keep it productively logged. And then the rest, they don't even mention the rest, the small rest, 100 square miles, is to be deeded forever wild. An irony is that Finch Prime's land stewardship, which goes back far longer than the Forest Preserve has ever existed, has been recognized with prestigious awards. However, the environmentalists are pressing that these, the most productive lands of the paper company, be relegated to forever wild, with the trees to rot, never to be logged again. The Nature Conservancy's plans to flip the 100 square miles of Finch Prime land to the state are currently stalled because of the state's budget crunch. In fact, the Conservancy sought help from the Colorado Authority for Cultural and the Colorado Educational Cultural Authority for a loan to refinance the loan to acquire the Finch Prime lands. They held a hearing in Glens Falls City Hall about this proposed loan. And it was packed with our people, thank you, who spoke in opposition. The paid directors of the major environmental groups were there speaking in favor. This authority had never experienced public opposition at one of their proposals before. They never had opposition at a hearing. They were amazed. In fact, the spokesperson there, the lawyer was shaking at the end of the hearing. Unless we can get a lawsuit, however, to enforce the IRS law that there has to be public support for such a loan, we can't stop it. The Adirondack Association of Towns and Villages released a report this spring that, in effect, heralds the excess of the environmental groups and the wealthy New York elite, whose goal to eradicate the local population is now crystal clear. First, I do have to make a qualification. There is a need for these people to have their dakas to allow some ordinary people to reside in the region. Somebody has to make their beds, so to speak. That is why the need to install sewage treatment facilities is so paramount in the Adirondacks, to make it possible to intensify the dwellings possible in these tiny areas, to create a little more somewhat dense housing in very limited areas. And this is being pressed by economic development types working with the APA, etc. So the AAA-TV report gets the point across. Of course, the association is not so happy. It has carefully demonstrated and documented the discovery that the population is dying, that jobs are being lost, and the like. Their leadership is working hard to get the news out and to arouse interest in the situation without seeming too fanatical. Their study, compiled by professional planners, the LA group of Saratoga, with funds from local government and a great grant from the Stewart's Ice Cream Company, is quite effective in documenting the radical decline here. They reported that since 1970, enrollment in school districts in the Adirondack Park has declined by 32%, by nearly 16,000 people. The number seems small, but our population is large. An article in the Adirondack Journal summarized the drift of the study's conclusion. Adirondacans are getting poorer and older, and their offspring are leaving. That was the headline. A report in the Hamilton County News in December 2004 about a school in Racket Lake had brought home the point of the extreme population decline. The article asked the question, what happens if a school has no pupils? With only 3 students in grades K through 6 and no new ones expected in the foreseeable future, that is the question facing the Racket Lake Union-Free School Board of Education, the paper reported. A half year later, the paper reported that the school held its last graduation and that in the future the Racket Lake children would attend the Indian Lake School. However, the Indian Lake School graduated only 10 pupils that year. The pressure on access to land and home ownership was borne out by the study's conclusion that in Hamilton County, which is smack in the center of the Adirondack Blue Line, nearly 70% of the home sales were to people who are second home buyers. State land acquisition, APA restrictions, and competition for more prosperous buyers from outside has undercut homes for the Adirondacans. I'm glad the AATV report didn't rely on unemployment statistics, considering that the current New York State labor report shows that Hamilton County has one of the most low unemployment rates in the state, 4.5% as of July. This is because when people of working age keep moving out, as the study shows, the unemployment rate doesn't climb. In addition, there are a great number of retired people, people on disability, and people on welfare up in the North Country, and the low-earning and partially unemployed, which are not counted on unemployment rolls because they're not actively looking for jobs. My quip about the success of the environmental groups being demonstrated by the AATV report doesn't mean to express any lack of appreciation for their disciplined statistics. I just want to refer to the report to help make clear how the idea of the forest preserve has evolved from one practicality and fairness to a mean-spirited agenda that has no acceptable practical purpose from a public interest